I only went to the library for books, but the librarian's smile made me realize I'd been overdue for something far more dangerous, falling for her. The library was always my escape. A quiet place where the world seemed to breathe slower, where the chaos of my 20-something life could shrink into silence between shelves of forgotten stories. That afternoon, the golden light of late autumn filtered through tall windows, dust floating like tiny stars in the air. My hands traced along the spines of thick history books, the ones I always reached for, serious, heavy, dependable. But then her voice interrupted the stillness. Smooth, steady, touched with a kind of warmth I hadn't expected. "You've been overdue for some fun," she said. I turned, and there she was behind the counter. A woman, no, a presence. Her hair, a rich chestnut threaded with wisdom silver, was swept neatly into a loose bun. She wore a simple cream blouse tucked into a charcoal skirt, nothing extravagant, yet it suited her with the elegance of someone who didn't need attention to command it. She must have been in her 40s, but there was nothing fragile about her. She looked, assured, confident. The kind of woman who knew herself completely. Her eyes met mine, amused but not unkind, as though she'd been waiting to say that line for weeks. I tried to respond, but the words tangled in my throat. I like these kinds of books, I managed. My explanation sounded weak even to me. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, a smile that seemed to tug at something restless inside me. She slid a lighter-looking novel across the counter, tapping the cover with a manicured finger. "Try this one. Life doesn't always have to be so serious, you know." I reached for the book, and in that small motion, our hands nearly brushed. Just a ghost of contact, but it jolted me more than I cared to admit. Her skin was close, warm, grounding. For a moment, I forgot the weight of the book in my palm and felt only the weight of her presence. The scent of her, faint lavender, mixed with the subtle hint of paper and ink, stayed with me as I stepped away. I should have been focused on the novel she'd chosen, but instead, my thoughts kept circling back to her voice, her eyes, that teasing smile. I had come looking for knowledge, but as I left, I carried something else entirely, curiosity, and the stirring of something I couldn't yet name. The library at night was a different world. The soft hum of fluorescent lights gave way to the low amber glow of desk lamps, their circles of warmth scattered like little islands across the vast sea of quiet. I hadn't planned on coming so late, but something pulled me there, maybe the promise of stillness, or maybe, her. When I stepped inside, the place was nearly deserted. Just one figure remained, her. She stood near the returns desk, carefully stacking a pile of hardcovers. The click of her heels echoed faintly against the polished floor. She looked up, surprised, then smiled, not the professional smile she gave everyone, but one that felt almost personal, like it was meant only for me. "You're becoming quite the night owl," she said, setting the books aside. "I guess I read better when it's quiet," I replied, though the truth was more complicated. She tilted her head, studying me for a moment, then motioned toward the back. "Come on. I was about to make tea. You can join me, if you don't mind the staff corner." The invitation caught me off guard. It felt like stepping over a line, into a space where patrons weren't supposed to go. But the warmth in her eyes disarmed my hesitation. I followed her through a narrow hallway until we reached a small room tucked behind the shelves, a cozy corner with 2 chairs, a desk, and a chipped electric kettle humming on a counter. She poured the tea with practiced hands, sliding a steaming mug toward me. The simple gesture felt intimate, like a ritual reserved for friends, or something more. We talked. At first, about books, her love of poetry, my habit of reading history late into the night. But slowly, the conversation shifted, peeling back layers. She admitted she often stayed late, not because of work, but because the silence kept her company. And I, perhaps too honestly, confessed how I often felt out of place among people my own age, as though I was waiting for a life that hadn't begun yet. Her laughter was soft, warm, and when she set her cup down, her hand brushed my wrist by accident. The touch was fleeting, a spark, really, but it lingered in my skin long after. For the first time, the library didn't feel like a fortress of silence. It felt alive. It felt like the beginning of something neither of us had planned for. The days after that evening lingered like an unfinished sentence. Every time I stepped into the library, I felt the air change when she looked up from her desk, her gaze holding mine for just a second too long. It wasn't just books anymore, it was something unspoken between us, growing louder in the silence. Yet with closeness came hesitation. One late afternoon, golden light spilling through tall windows, I found her at a table sorting through returned novels. She looked tired, but still composed, her blouse sleeves rolled neatly to her elbows. I sat across from her, the weight of words pressing at the back of my throat, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. She noticed. She always noticed. Her hands paused mid-motion, fingers resting on the spine of a book, and she lowered her eyes. "I don't let people close often," she said quietly, as if admitting something she wasn't supposed to. The way her voice dipped at the end made it sound more like a confession than a statement. I studied her, the curve of her shoulders slightly hunched, the way her thumb traced absent circles against the hard cover. For the first time, the confident librarian I admired looked almost fragile, like she was bracing for a rejection that hadn't even happened yet. The silence between us grew heavy, not awkward but charged, like the pause before a storm breaks. My chest tightened. I could feel her pulling back, hiding behind walls she had built long before I ever walked into her library. And in that moment, instinct carried me forward. Slowly, carefully, I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her fingers stiffened at first, as if startled, but then eased beneath my palm. Warmth spread from the contact, steady and grounding. I wanted her to know that I wasn't here out of fleeting curiosity or some careless impulse. I wanted her to feel that I meant it, that she mattered. When she finally looked up, her eyes shimmered in the fading light, filled with questions she didn't dare ask aloud. And though my throat felt tight, I managed to whisper, "I'm not going anywhere." Her lips parted as if to respond, but she only let out a soft breath, part relief, part disbelief. That breath, that moment, said more than any words could. The world outside the library carried on, but inside, it felt like time had slowed, holding us both still in the fragile, tender weight of hesitation, and trust beginning to form. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm, quiet yet unmistakable. What had started as chance encounters grew into something deliberate, though neither of us ever said it out loud. She was the librarian, I was the young man who borrowed too many books, but between those roles, a softer truth was beginning to live. Sometimes I'd find her shelving returns, and I'd step in to help, balancing stacks of hardcovers against my chest. She would smile at my clumsy attempts, shaking her head when I nearly toppled over. Other times, I'd linger near the front desk just to hear her talk about the poems she loved, or the authors she said, wrote as if they had lived twice. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was ordinary, almost painfully so. Yet in those ordinary moments, something extraordinary breathed between us. One evening, I spotted her scarf draped over the back of a chair she'd left behind. It was soft, pale lavender, carrying that faint trace of her, a perfume both floral and clean, mixed with something only hers. For a moment I simply held it, thumb brushing against the fabric, before carefully folding it and setting it aside. The next day, when she returned, I placed it gently over her shoulders. My fingers brushed the nape of her neck as the scarf settled into place. She stilled at the touch, a small shiver running through her. And when she turned her head slightly, her eyes caught mine with a softness that made my chest ache. "Thank you," she murmured, though the words carried a weight far beyond the scarf. From then on, even the smallest gestures became laden with meaning. The way her hand lingered a second longer when she passed me a book. The way I leaned a little closer to hear her whisper in the hushed library. The way we shared silence, not awkward, but comfortable, as if the air itself had grown accustomed to our closeness. There was no need for bold declarations. Our affection lived in subtleties, A smile exchanged across the room, the brushing of shoulders as we walked side by side between shelves, the warmth of her presence in the quietest spaces. And though neither of us named it yet, we both knew, this wasn't simply companionship, or the fondness of a librarian and a loyal patron. This was something else, something growing stronger with each shared moment. It was the beginning of us. The night it finally happened, the world outside seemed to echo the weight of what was stirring between us. Rain fell in steady sheets against the library windows, turning the glass into rippling mirrors of lamplight. The sound was soothing, relentless, like a heartbeat against the silence. I hadn't planned to stay late, but I found myself drawn there anyway, the way I always was. And when I stepped into the near-empty building, she was there, as I knew she would be, tucking stray chairs back into place. Her blouse was slightly rumpled from a long day, her hair pinned loosely, a few strands falling gracefully along her cheeks. She looked up as I approached, and her expression softened in that way it always did when our eyes met. "You're here again," she said quietly, as though she had been expecting me. "I could ask you the same," I replied. Her laugh was almost a whisper, warm enough to ease the tension in my chest. "Somebody has to keep this place from falling apart." I followed her as she moved between tables, straightening books, her movements unhurried, deliberate. The library was cloaked in shadows now, save for the dim pools of light cast by the lamps. It felt like the rest of the world had been locked away, leaving only us inside this sanctuary of paper and rain. At one point, she reached up to adjust a high shelf, standing on tiptoe. Without thinking, I stepped closer, steadying the books in her hands before they slipped. Our arms brushed, and for a moment, neither of us pulled away. She glanced at me then, her face inches from mine. Her eyes held something, hesitation, longing, fear, all tangled together. "You come here a lot," she murmured, her voice lower than usual. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The truth pressed against me, impossible to contain any longer. "I don't just come for the books anymore." Her breath caught. The sound was so soft I might have imagined it, but her eyes widened, her lips parting as if she hadn't expected me to speak what had been obvious for weeks. "What do you mean?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. I steadied myself, feeling the storm outside mirror the storm inside. "I come, for you." Silence stretched. For a second, I worried I had broken the fragile balance we had built, but then she set the books down slowly, her hands trembling as she did. She looked at me as though seeing me for the first time, not as the boy who borrowed too many novels, but as a man daring to cross a line no one else had crossed with her. Her voice was barely a whisper when she finally spoke. "I've been waiting for you to say that." The confession unraveled something in me. Relief, joy, disbelief, all tangled together in one breath. I took a step closer, close enough to see the flicker of lamplight dancing in her eyes, close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her. Her hand rose slowly, almost uncertain, until her fingertips touched my cheek. The gesture was tender, hesitant, as though she feared I might vanish if she dared too much. I covered her hand with mine, pressing it against my skin, grounding both of us in the reality of this moment. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows. Inside, the silence wrapped around us, charged and alive. Neither of us rushed. We didn't need to. Every heartbeat, every glance, every touch carried the weight of weeks spent dancing around the truth. I leaned slightly into her palm, feeling the steadiness of her touch despite its trembling. She exhaled, her breath brushing softly against me, and in that instant, the unspoken became undeniable. We didn't kiss. Not yet. The moment wasn't about that. It was about the confession, about finally pulling the words from the shadows and laying them bare between us. And though the storm raged outside, I felt nothing but stillness, a quiet certainty anchoring me to her. For the first time, I knew, this wasn't fleeting. This was real. The days after that rainy night felt different, though nothing on the surface had changed. We still met in the quiet spaces of the library, still spoke softly between shelves, still shared the same silences that had always bound us together. Yet now, there was no veil between us. The truth had been spoken, and in its wake, a gentle certainty grew. She didn't avoid me. In fact, if anything, she seemed more at ease, as though the weight she had carried, the fear of being seen, of being wanted at her age, had finally lifted. And I, too, felt lighter. No longer did I question why I returned again and again. It wasn't for the books. It hadn't been for a long time. It was for her. Always her. One evening, close to closing time, I found her sitting near the tall windows, a poetry book resting in her lap. The library was empty except for us, the fading sunlight spilling across the wooden floor in long ribbons of gold. She looked up as I approached, her smile small but unguarded, her eyes soft with something I could only call trust. "Come sit," she said simply, patting the seat beside her. I settled next to her, the leather chair creaking faintly beneath our weight. For a while, neither of us spoke. She read aloud a few lines from the book, her voice carrying a rhythm that made the words linger in the air even after she closed it again. I didn't care much for poetry before, but in her voice, it felt alive. Eventually, she leaned back, resting her head lightly against the chair. Her shoulder brushed mine, a quiet reminder of closeness. And then, slowly, she shifted, letting her head rest against me instead. The moment was so natural, so unforced, it almost startled me. Her cheek pressed gently to my arm, and I felt the warmth of her breath as it evened out. My chest tightened with something more powerful than desire, it was belonging. I turned slightly, enough to see the delicate strands of hair falling loose along her face, enough to catch the calm in her closed eyes. Tentatively, I slid my hand over hers where it rested in her lap. My fingers interlaced with hers, slow, steady, deliberate. She gave the faintest squeeze in return, and that single gesture said everything, she wasn't afraid anymore. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full, of acceptance, of the kind of peace that comes when two people stop resisting what they already know. After a long while, she spoke, her voice quiet, almost fragile. "Do you ever wonder what people would say, about us?" Her words hung heavy, but I didn't flinch. I tightened my hand around hers and answered with the only truth that mattered. "Let them talk. They don't see what I see." She exhaled, a soft breath that carried both relief and surrender. When she lifted her head to look at me, her eyes shone in the fading light. There was no hesitation now, only the certainty of a woman who had spent years guarding her heart, finally allowing someone in. I leaned closer, not in haste, but with reverence. My forehead touched hers, and for a moment, we simply breathed the same air, eyes closed, hearts aligned. And then, with quiet inevitability, her lips brushed mine, not urgent, not desperate, but tender. A kiss that felt less like a spark and more like a vow. When we pulled back, the room seemed to glow with something brighter than the sunset. She rested her hand against my chest, right over the steady beat of my heart, and whispered, "You've given me something I thought I'd lost." I covered her hand with mine, anchoring her there. "And you've given me something I didn't know I was looking for." We stayed like that until the last sliver of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, until the lamps became the only light left in the library. Two souls, once strangers separated by years and silence, now sitting together in a closeness that felt inevitable. It wasn't the kind of love that shouted for attention. It was quieter, steadier, like the turning of pages in a beloved book. A story not rushed, not forced, but written with care, one chapter at a time. And as I walked her home that evening, her hand still firmly in mine, I realized the truth I had been searching for all along: she wasn't just a chapter in my life. She was the story I wanted to keep reading, over and over, without end.